Adrian Rurifo.
Tēnā koe te hea mana o te warena. Mr. Chair, I'd like to begin again by suggesting some titles for this bill. And my titles are derived from a quote that I made in the other parts of the committee stage, and they're from the New Zealand Principals Federation. I think, taking from what they said, this bill could easily be called the Altering the Shape of Our Education System Bill. It could also be changing our education system without an openly expressed rationale. And I refer to comments that I made in the first reading. I believe, sir, that this bill is really about preparing our education system for privatisation. And that's what underpins this particular bill, that the education legislation bill makes several changes which don't really make any sense except if you were preparing the education system for a different pathway. And I suggest to the House, sir, that the comments that in the submission from the New Zealand Principals Federation, namely, on the surface, they might be described as a collection of ill-conceived, baseless changes which lack any intelligent rationale. Now, those are pretty strong words, and they're strong words that I think that this House should take note of, that an organisation like New Zealand Principals Federation are a very important part of the New Zealand education system, and that's why I stand here and say those changes to charter schools, which we will never agree with on this side of the House. The changes to how schools are managed, making a more corporate model to self-governing schools. And if we go back to 1989, and that the whole notion of self-managed schools as in the legislation that was put up in 1989. And we need to examine this very closely for what it really does. And sir, I say to the House today that I do not agree with this particular piece of legislation. I believe that the title ought to be something quite different, more descriptive about what it actually does. And so, my contribution in this, albeit a very exciting day, maybe I think that those, in all seriousness, those particular clauses that make significant changes all add up to exactly what I said, preparing the education system for privatisation. There is in the other part, which is really the part 2 of the bill, which I thought those several of those issues within part 2 of the bill ought to have been in a separate bill altogether. For example, the changes that are made to the Ngārimu Trust. I think those are parts of the bill that I do actually support, but part 1 I think ought to be renamed the Altering the Shape of Our Education System without any expressed rationale, and the expressed rationale that ought to be in there is privatising our education system. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
In order